some of the challenges, we've kind of come through some of that valley of death. We've gone from the pilot scale, the demonstration scale, and have first commercial scale facility that's up. Certainly still using money to grow the company. But we're really looking forward to providing the world with a boundless source of protein that doesn't compromise the planet. That's our focus today at Unibio, is taking, again, that little genesis of stuff in the water of a lake and bringing that to the world.
Welcome to this week's episode of Leaders on a Mission, where I'm joined by inspiring leaders, really driven by the impact of creating a healthy and sustainable world. Now, in today's episode, I'm joined by David Henstrom, CEO of Unibio, a pioneering biotech company and a world leader in microbial protein fermentation. Now, David has vast experience and expertise across health, wellness, and food, nutrition sectors, and really looking forward to, I suppose, exploring, David's career today and some of the key trends and challenges, really, I suppose, across the food tech and alternative protein sectors. And David, you're a busy man traveling around the world, going to various events all around the world. So super appreciate you giving your time today and coming on the show.
Hey, thanks, Simon. It's great to be with you.
Maybe we'll just start, David, thinking about, I suppose, where you are right now, right? Well, what's really helped shape you kind of professionally throughout your kind of career, as you sit here today, as it were? What have been the main forces, as it were?
I think I've really been grateful to have a lot of mentors that I've met over the years. Actually, one story I'll tell you, it started out really early. I was 2 months into Cargill, and I spent almost 27 years at Cargill, which we'll talk about later during this podcast. But and the CEO, Whitney McMillan, at that time, who was the last family, Cargill McMillan family CEO, he came down on a trip to the fertilizer division. I was trading fertilizer internationally, and he showed up with his wife, and there was, at that headquarters, there was probably 25, 30 of us. And I'd been at the company for 2 months. This guy's leading a company over 100,000 employees. And he walks in the office and he reaches out his hand and shakes my hand and says, "Hi, David, nice to meet you." And I'm like, first of all, he knows my name. What's that all about? And then he starts to go into, tell me a little bit about how it was at Michigan, which was the university I just graduated from. What have you learned so far in your, in the job here, trading fertilizer, et cetera? So he knew like 3 or 4 snippets about myself. And he did that. I watched him after with me, and I watched him, interact with the rest of the folks there. And my mind was just blown. And it was like, wow, how can a guy who's CEO of a massive company like this create connection? That had a profound impact me just on learnings and from a leadership standpoint, and how, connectivity and authenticity is really, really important. Another point that came down, I think people in the biotech sector can resonate maybe with this. There was a 4-year juncture in my time at Cargill where it came time to choose. I was in a strategy, business development, M&A team, corporately working on stuff in the center of the company. And now it's time to go take the first, job opportunity outside of that. And I had 2 jobs that kind of came down to. One job was go into our financial markets division and work on distressed real estate and, go after just making a lot of money and taking, our arbitrage opportunities and buying real estate for cents on the dollar and then selling it for a higher price. And the other one is going and helping start up a group called Nutraceuticals. And it was a skunk works, business development. Company didn't have much going on there. I had a member of the family that kind of was interested in the area. And so it was kind of follow the money or follow the passion. and went after the passion and, generated some money from then on. But it was kind of, talking with some mentors at that point in time. What do you want to do? What do you want to be known for? So those are kind of a couple of early experiences that had some formative value for me.
Interesting. You took that turn, and really the nutraceutical space, you've really been aligned to the world of, I suppose, food and health and nutrition, really pretty much for your whole career. So what is the attraction? What's kept you in that space, as it were,
So maybe early on, I'll talk about when I was a chemical engineer undergrad. I had a experience working as a co-op for Exxon in Baytown, Texas. And at the same point in time, I was pre-med. And so a couple nights during the week or one night a week, depending on how much time I had during that 4-month experience, I'd go downtown to the Houston Medical Center. And I became friends with one of the head nurses down there and got to go to the observation deck and see some surgeries performed by DeBakey, who's, DeBakey and Cooley fame of the early open heart surgery stuff. And so was debating between medicine and engineering and innovation like that. And for me, as I saw what I could do in the engineering side, and the breadth of opportunity it exposed you to, and the ability to make an impact alongside health and the desire for human health, it kind of was a merger for me. And it took me a while to kind of get there. I went through, first an experience at Dow Chemical working in separations technology, but kind of made my way to, again, this human health side, where I did have a passion and, kind of nursed that over my last 20, 25 years. So.
Yeah. And I suppose, saying about the story when you first joined Cargill, 27 years, that's man and boy, really, right? And, as you reflect on, and I know you did lots of a really broad variety of kind of roles during that time. And I particularly remember I knew you at that time for doing lots of, I suppose, global account kind of creation as it related to food and nutritional kind of ingredients. That's probably where you came on my radar, I think, first of all. But I suppose when you look back and reflect on that time at Cargill, right, how do you reflect back at that particular time and your career there?
So Cargill is just a fantastic company, and is globally present, everywhere. And so met people from all different geographies, cultures. I think I ran a joint venture in China that was 10 years. I didn't live there, but went there probably 50 times. Been in Japan and other places, 20 plus times. Started up our nutrition group in Europe, so moved over to Europe into Belgium, Brussels. Spent a couple of years there. And so just for me, the opportunity to create across a bunch of different sectors, new businesses. And so that was what's interesting with my career at Cargill is I was somewhat of an intrapreneur. So was able, with the backing of a very large company and interest in the leaders in the company, to create new growth and new value, to, identify an unmet need, look at creating a strategy. And then inside Cargill, it was then going to the investment committees and creating the investment thesis, that they would fund. And so I think that's, what I learned at Cargill was that, how do you bring people along with an idea and get them to then invest in that idea and to back it.
There's a lot of stuff that would have really stood you in good stead for your current position as CEO of Unibio. Had you always thought about going to work for, like an entrepreneurial kind of venture-funded organization? Was that somewhere in mind, or was that just something that happened? And
I watched and I dealt with a lot of companies that were like this, because Cargill was a magnet for companies who were looking for strategic linkages, right? And either as a go-to-market partner, as an investor, or et cetera. So I had a lot of interface with companies that were smaller and growing, and I had seen kind of, how they operated, and was intrigued by some of the ways that they could be agile and move, et cetera, with that. But also inside Cargill, I was doing a lot of the same work, but with the backing, of a big company. And so it wasn't like I was always looking for the right exit, from Cargill, for sure, not that. And the people at Cargill were just tremendously, bright. And one of the things you could do is, if you needed a world expert on almost any subject, you could pick up the phone and they're right there inside the company. But it was intriguing to me when this opportunity came along with Unibio. And really, the stage of the company had already gone through piloting, demonstration, had a first commercial scale plant that had been built, and just starting commercializing. So I was like, okay, my skills, capabilities, what I've done, I think can be beneficial to them where they are on their journey. So that was when I, pulled the ripcord and, moved my family, and we came to live in Denmark. So.
Yeah, it's always an interesting one, moving the family, isn't it? And that kind of discussion. When do you have it as you're going through a process? When do you start having the discussion with the family as you're engaging? It's an interesting.
Well, early. I mean, as early as possible. Certainly, I have 4 boys, and so there's only one that's still with us. But for my wife, certainly it was quick, early.
Yeah, and making the move right from I know you've lived and worked globally, right? And you've been over in Europe as well. But what's it like to move to Copenhagen? And what's Copenhagen been like for you?
The move has been great. I think it helped that we moved over here in June. So it can be wet and, and kind of cold in the winters. But I came from Minnesota, so I can't complain about the cold.
Oh, that's Minnesota, right? Okay.
Yeah, so a little colder in Minnesota, maybe a little more sun in the winters in Minnesota. But no, the culture is great. Tremendous city, Copenhagen. The food, we live a little bit north of Copenhagen. The history and the ambiance of Europe is just something that my wife and I, we just really love. So it's been great to be here for us.
Super. So tell us a little bit about Unibio, right? Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges it really solves and what you guys are doing.
So we're a company, actually the genesis of our technology comes from identifying a microbe called Methylococcus capsulatus.
Can you spell that?
Yeah. Inside a lake in Bath, England is where it was discovered. And that naturally consumes, as deciduous materials decay, they give off methane. And so the methane and the oxygen that's in the water, nitrogen, other minerals, these bugs, these microbes eat, and then they accumulate protein within. And then that's ultimately eaten through the food chain by fish. So what the company did is they took that concept and put it on land in a fermentation, same way you'd brew, beer or other products. Just we're doing a gas liquid fermentation, making protein in a fermentation system. So some of the, genesis of it, which is really unique, is the carbon source. So rather than traditional sugar, in any different form as a carbon source, we use methane or biomethane. And it's a very efficient carbon source and one which helps to move away from, land use that you have to grow, for example, a lot of corn to produce the sugar, then to ferment. And here you just take, gas or biogas directly from the source. I think some of the challenges, we've kind of come through some of that valley of death, which, we've gone from the pilot scale, the demonstration scale, and have first commercial scale facility that's up. Certainly still using money to grow the company, but we're really looking forward to providing the world with a boundless source of protein that doesn't compromise the planet. That's our focus today at Unibio, is taking, again, that little genesis of stuff in the water of a lake and bringing that to the world.
Got it. Okay, no, fabulous. So where is this first commercial scale kind of facility then?
It's an interesting story, so I'll take a little bit. So we have a licensee that's in Europe that has rights to produce our product in Russia. So the first full-scale plant was built 1,000 meters off the border of the Estonian-Russian border. So it's in Russia. And so today, obviously, it's a challenge, because of what's gone on with Russia's war in Ukraine. And so we've had to pause a bit on, the commercialization aspects we were doing with our partner there. And, still, obviously, they're a licensing partner of ours, but we've had to move to other areas to look at building commercial scale plants for the time being.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. I understand. And am I right? Are you building a facility somewhere else at the moment? Or?
We're not currently in construction, but we are doing engineering studies again on projects in the Middle East.
Got it. Okay. No, great. It's an unbelievable technology, this, isn't it? It really is. What are the real challenges when you take this technology, right, and you talk about the valley of death? What are the massive hurdles you need to kind of get over the valley of death with?
A few things as you scale up with any biological process, it's a little bit different than synthetic organic chemistry. And you have to make sure that you have, in our case, simple things. It's a gas liquid fermentation. So you got to make sure that you have the intimate mixing of gas and the liquid. So you get contact between the microorganism and the gases it needs to consume. So those are, obviously one challenge which any gas liquid fermentation is going to have. Certainly there's a capitalization of the company because as you start to build facilities, they're capital intensive. So how do you do that? Self-funded, partner funded? Do you consider, doing it with a licensee? And so, we're certainly developing partners who we can jointly invest with. And then, and this comes first actually, is creating the market. And so making sure the product is fit for purpose in the target markets that we're going after. So our main targets are aquaculture, starter feeds, and pet food to start out with, ultimately human food. So it's making sure you have something that can seamlessly integrate into that global feed system or ultimately food system.
Where is the journey from here then, for instance? What is the real vision and, the dream for the company?
I think maybe just go back a bit. Last year, we raised a $70 million raise with a partner, the Saudi Industrial Investment Group. They're located obviously in Saudi Arabia, and they're a very sophisticated operator that's had a 25-year joint venture in the petrochemical area with Chevron Phillips. We've partnered with them. They've funded the company to continue innovating. And we're also exploring a project in the region with them. And, we'll announce more of that at the appropriate time. But I think if you ask the question of the journey is creating the right kind of partnerships and joint ventures, if you will, to build facilities that then can produce the capacity of protein that'll make a meaningful difference. So to date, the first plant that was built using our technology that I just mentioned was, thousands of tons. The plants that we'll be looking to build going forward will be tens of thousands of tons. And that just is a different kind of capital intensity that you need to raise, money to get behind.
Yeah, I understand. And how come those markets? Why aquaculture specifically? What's the fit there with aquaculture?
Well, the fit overall for our protein is, from a planet-friendly standpoint, we use no arable land. We use significantly less water than other plant proteins, and we have a decent carbon footprint with line of sight to drive that very, very low. So there's sustainable aspects of it. The number one are intriguing. A second, there is, fit for purpose. Our product, it has all the amino acids that fish meal has, which is kind of the gold standard for some of those markets. But fish meal has come to kind of a cap in terms of how much can be harvested from the seas sustainably. And we have the majority of our amino acids that are contained in the protein. We are equal to or better than, in terms of quantity, than fish meal. So people look at our product and they say, okay, understand there's a cap on fish meal. If we want to grow outside and continue to grow with shrimp production or salmon production or seaweed production, some of the Mediterranean species, then we need to have alternative sources of protein. That's where really a fit. I mean, one case example I'd say would be Saudi. They have this Vision 2030 taking their production up over 100,000 tons today, or to over 600,000 tons by 2030. And they have real projects going after that, but they're completely dependent upon imported feed. And so it's having something in the region where you can produce it with an abundant raw material that they have to use. It's extremely synergistic.
I'm fascinated. Where do you capture all the gas from then, for instance? You mentioned that joint venture that they have over there as well in Saudi. Do you have to capture the gas on site like a facility?
Yeah, so we have, for example, I taught our demonstration facility here in Denmark runs 100% on biogas. So Denmark is one of those advanced nations that's going almost to 100% biogas on the grid. In for example, the Middle East, it'll substantially be as we start coming from just the natural gas grid. And so, for example, in Saudi, that would become from Saudi Aramco, who would be the provider of the natural gas.
Yeah, absolutely. But where do you capture it then? Picturing the gas coming in, and then it's kind of meeting the different kind of bugs, as it were, and fermentation.
Yeah, the gas comes, through injection inlets into our fermentation system, which is just, again, water and the bugs running around what we call a U-loop. It's a vertical pipe, if you will, with a lot of, key technology on instrumentation and the way the product and the way we, manage the gases. So we get methane and we get oxygen, nitrogen, other minerals coming in. And as those bugs flow around, again, they're consuming those things and growing the protein in it. And then they come up to the top and we take off, a certain portion of those bugs and then take them and through a drying system and through then a system that will kill the bugs. And that'll be the protein biomass, which then will be, dried as a powder and or pelletized and sold to customers downstream. So that's the bit of the process, if that's what you were asking.
Yeah, it's fabulous, isn't it? It's a real kind of application of biotechnology for industrial kind of purposes, and really one that can help feed the world's growing population. It really is very, very neat play, as it were.
It is, and it's a bit different than most of liquid fermentations, right? Where you might have a CSTR or bubble column or something, and the mixing there. This is a different type of mixing to get the gas liquid intimacy and the mass transfer that you need.
I suppose for you on the journey, and you mentioned intrapreneurship earlier. Really interesting this, like how much does intrapreneurship and your time at Cargill, how different has it been, going into a privately owned, venture funded, pre-revenue almost like organization, as it were, which needs to build and scale up a kind of process. I'd love to understand a little bit of the journey for you and some of the learnings around that.
Yeah, so I think the training and the experiences that I was able to have at Cargill in starting up was very helpful and formative, because you still had to be scrappy. You still had the pressures of, even though Cargill's a very large company, you put that down into divisions and then business units and in areas, and all of a sudden you have your own pressures on delivering on Project X or business Y. A lot of those kind of expectations of performance were already there. And I think that was helpful, that it's not just a free lunch. I think coming to a different country, if you will, and then a company that's at a certain scale with commercial production, et cetera, but maybe doesn't have the parental funding, if you will, pool of money. I think the biggest observation for me is creating and telling the story to people who can write the checks, that can fund the innovation, fund the commercialization, fund the scale up, et cetera. And so, for me, I had somebody, obviously wise when I came into this role, and they said, "Hey, your first and most important job is never run out of money," right? That's what every entrepreneurial CEO is going to be told of a private company. So just getting used to that and making sure that you can bring on investors that see the same vision as we do. That's been one obviously big learning.
And probably different as well, because out there you see so many companies where the founders, they're very engaged with the technology and, brought the technology on or developed it and founded it, as it were. But I think your story is an interesting one. You're really bringing this, I suppose, commercial, general business kind of acumen, to a company which is clearly going to be focused on markets, market penetration and growth, not just here's the technology and selling the technology, as it were. It's probably a little bit more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it does obviously help to have that background. I think that's what they probably recognized when they brought me on. I replaced the founding CEO in this role, who actually was on and stepped and continued to maintain his board seat, and so he's been continuously on. And it's for what maybe one takeaway to people listening on this podcast is, when you're a founding CEO, having the understanding perspective to realize when it's the right time to hand the torch or the baton, if you will. There might be some CEOs that A, have the capability, and B, the interest in continuing to scale it up, or we can talk about CEOs who have done that. But I think the number of successful folks who have been able to do that from inception and ideation all the way through to growth of the big organization company, it's relatively few that have been successful doing that. So I think that's, kind of knowing what your skills, capabilities are and what your interests are. Understanding that is really, really important for founding CEOs.
Yeah, there's been a lot of that in the market over the last, 6 to 12 months. I'm not sure if that's driven predominantly because of the challenges, out there, as it were. And my general sense is that founding CEOs aren't always too keen to move sideways. It's something that maybe emanates after a certain amount of time, as it were. But sometimes they get so invested in the journey. It's like a baby, right? It's just, they want to see it, and they're so passionate about it. It's, it can be really difficult to kind of break yourself away from that. That's an interesting perspective.
Yeah. I think everybody's got kind of horses for courses, right? And what's the right horse to drive the company at this stage of the journey is something that both, I think CEOs, founding CEOs, boards obviously need to lean into and make sure they keep eye on.
And I suppose the nature of this business, if we're looking at, say, tech, right, broad tech, and you look at well-documented companies where CEOs have been right from the ground up, as it were, and you look at this business, right, these kind of businesses, it just strikes me as a lot more, there's obviously a lot more complexity. There's engineering, there's manufacturing. There's so much that kind of goes into then becoming an R&D project to a commercial project that, if you're at that beginning stage, in your early stage, and you're in the lab and you're developing the technology, you're bringing it, it's just a completely different skill set, isn't it, really?
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think even then you look at the channel complexity as you start to develop what market's going to go after, how are you going to go after them? Are you going to go direct? Are you going to indirect? Distributors, agents? How are you going to attack different markets? That's also a level of complexity that comes with, going commercial. Because we sit in our business, we're not just a technology development company, we're also the final marketer and seller of the product. And so, we look for partners here in the middle of it to help us create the plants and build the facilities, and we'll form joint ventures around that. But we're just playing a heavy role in the application development, doing the trials in, aquaculture, in pet food, in starter feeds, ultimately human, and then selling and marketing the product to those end markets.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Look, I mean, some of the fermentation, some of the capabilities, some of the problems this technology solves is it can have high impact. But I suppose the market generally over the last 8 to 10 months, it's been a real challenge, isn't it, with, I suppose, food tech companies using precision fermentation, in terms of companies raising finance and being able to take, to the next scale and the next growth. How do you feel about, because you would have seen different kind of, I suppose, investment cycles, as it were. How do you feel about the future of, this type of technology and the issues it can really solve?
Yeah, so I think generally, getting away from Unibio, that I think, and I can talk about secondarily, but primarily biology has such, and I think that's why it's so intriguing, right? Is it has so much capability to do things that you just can't get out of traditional synthetic organic chemistry, and to do it in a sustainable way. So I think that drive and that interest and that capability is going to continue to be there. And I think you're going to see, even with the emerging big data science, AI tools, et cetera, that can help work on the process and manufacturing, will help you understand what's going on at different scales and better optimize. For our company, we overcame a significant financing challenge opportunity, if you will, last year, which helped us put that aside. It's never totally aside. You're always thinking about, raising money, but to really focus then on, okay, how do we scale this out now? We already have one licensee that built a commercial plant. How do we now scale that technology out into more, geographies and more areas? And so with technology like this, there's always a shiny object syndrome, which you can get lulled into and say, wow, we could do this. We could go all these, 40 different directions. And while the technology might have value for those, if you don't focus on, what's going to drive the next step of development, et cetera, you can have 40 balls in the air that are only, not even half baked. And at some point in time, you need to deliver on the promises, that you've made on first, if you will, pie out of the oven.
David, tell me a little bit about the cultural kind of aspects, joining a firm, predominantly Danish. I know one of, the mandates was to broaden the scope geographically and I suppose internationally, really, of Unibio. How have you found working with a very specific Danish culture, and how does it compare to, maybe where you come from?
I have a great team, and most of them, work here in Denmark, although we have a few people that don't. They come from a lot of different backgrounds, though. Some Middle Eastern background, Greek, other places, so French. So it's not just maybe, Danish, although Danish make up most of our employee base. The second thing is, I'd say, one thing that I appreciate is the culture of that. Maybe it's a Danish work culture is highly productive. They get to their work and they really focus on, making the breakthroughs and the strides and everything else. And so that has been, nice to see. So very kind of focused work ethic, if you will. I bring my own kind of, American work style, I guess, and how I engage and try to engage people. And that kind of adds to what they have here as a culture and the people I see, we're building something that is going to be more international in its flavor, right? Because we are serving more parts of the world than just Denmark. But I think the innovative capabilities, the desire to grow, the system that's here in Denmark to help that, it's a nice place to be operating from.
Danish culture, very collaborative, as it were, and also like pretty direct to the point as well, without being kind of a rude, respectful, but direct and to the point.
Yeah, having worked in the Flemish side of Belgium, which is more Dutch in its nature, it does have some of that kind of direct to the point, pressure makes diamonds kind of attitude.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you think about the culture, then you said you've got a great team. Just a couple of things, right? I mean, one being the mission. Do you find that, what you're doing, you're solving a real problem. You're a mission-driven company, right? You exist to solve a particular problem, leveraging innovation. Does that in itself bring a certain type of person into the organization?
I certainly think it does. It does help. To get people to have a passion about, making the world a better place, right? We are a mission-driven company. We are focused on commercializing affordable, scalable, planet-friendly protein, right? That can fit into their system. So I think that mission-driven nature, it does take people who are, and you see, I think particularly with some of even the younger generation, they want to be part of something that's going to have impact. And so when they see, for example, what we're doing and how we're having impact, how that shows up. I had the opportunity to go participate as part of a Danish delegation to COP28 this year, and then got an invitation to go to an event at Davos. And so these are areas which they see and they understand, oh, wow, having impact, bringing a new source of protein to the world, that it's an adjunct to what we do in the fishing and farming sector, but it's maybe not as resource intensive. That does have an impact on hiring and retaining people for sure.
Absolutely. I'm wondering if it's like almost half the battle when it comes to engaging staff. That one ticks the box and they're therefore with you on the journey, as opposed to the wavering of motivations and losing people. And it really seems that you're able to build that engagement and that trust.
Yeah, it's making a difference in the world, and that's helpful.
What other advice would you have for, say, budding entrepreneurs, CEOs who are building a company and they really want to develop a great culture? You've got a small team and you want to take that to the next step. Well, what's really key, do you think, to get right?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'd be hesitant to say I'm the oracle of, sage advice for anybody, but I'll just tell what's impacted me a lot in my career and then hopefully bringing some of that to Unibio. To me, it comes down to creating a culture of, integrity, of trust, and of care, kind of in every interaction. So, people can trust, they know you say what you're going to do and do what you say. There's difficult conversations at times you have to have with people on the team. There's congratulatory discussions, but they can trust you on whichever part of the spectrum that conversation is on. And then just care. And it kind of comes back to that first interaction I talked about with the CEO of Cargill, where I was like, wow. And I found out after the fact that he actually had some note cards, and he does this wherever he went. And he would study this, and they'd go back and forth with his wife, who he traveled periodically, and they'd quiz each other. And that kind of cascaded down through other leaders of the company, which were pretty magnificent about doing that. So those kind of things are really important, I think, to building a culture where people feel cared for. I also just would add, there's a couple of things I've learned along the way. One was some sage advice. Bad news never gets better with time. And so that was one piece of advice learned early in my career. It was just like, if it's bad news, just get it out. Get it out so you can start going to work on it. I think particularly in the biotech area, you have news that's going to be bad news or tough news at times. You just got to get it out so you can go work on the problem. I think second is just more from a traditional business, GE's performance values matrix that had how somebody performs, the performance in the job, and then fit with values on one. And the whole concept of if it's great performance and they're high fit with the values, rock star, continue to support them, feed them, et cetera. If they're a bad performer, not a fit with the culture, usually, you're exiting from the organization. Then if they're performing on the low scale, but they're a fit with the values, well, give them another chance. help raise their performance in some ways, coach them, et cetera. But I think the toughest thing with sometimes CEOs to not spend the right amount of time is you have a rock star, somebody's performing great, but the value fit's just not there. And if you've got that, I've found that you got to really intervene and take action, have a clear values discussion quickly, urgently, and with intensity, because it usually doesn't change. Those are a couple things that have been helpful for me in kind of culturally building an expectation of, what it's like to work here and what we expect. And that's everybody on the same page.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You want to try and rescue those people from falling off the edge there. But no, it was incredible. That advice, your first formative experience at Cargill, was clearly something that you've, really embedded in your own style and approach with things. And sounds like a great organization to work for, Unibio. So I suppose if you are a candidate looking to, join Unibio or consider joining Unibio, what the candidate really get from joining?
I think what you're going to get is the ability to be given responsibility and accountability for an area that you need to deliver on. Second, you'll be in a company that intensively collaborates. So it's not you're thrown to the wolves and stuff, but everybody wants others' success to be their success. And you're also going to be in an environment that really, values execution and executing with urgency and pushing the company forward. And at the end of the day, you're going to help and be part of leading a global transformation of protein production, that harnesses all the great alchemy in nature, to brew, we call it, to brew a resilient planet-friendly protein. So I think that's the kind of thing, if you want to be part of an impact and look at the future of protein production, we just can't produce as much on land as we have, going forward that's necessary to feed the 10 billion people, then Unibio is the right place.
Absolutely. David, thank you very much. Learned loads during this conversation. Thanks for sharing all your wisdom and kind of expertise and coming on the show. And we're rooting for you and wish you all the best for 24 and onwards.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Happy 2024 to you as well.
Yeah. No, thanks, David.